Hello friends. One of the comments I get on this channel quite frequently is something along the lines of, wow, you've written so many books, I'm so far behind you, I have a lot of writing to do to catch up, or I can never write as quickly as you do. And so while I do have some videos that were like general tips on how to write faster, I wanted to do a video that's just a breakdown of how I wrote a publishable book from start to finish in 30 days, and B, why it's not very realistic to expect that most books are going to be able to be written in that kind of time frame. In recent years, especially since indie publishing came to the forefront, speed has really been valued in writing more than it used to be. Like when I was traditionally published, I was in fact discouraged from writing more than one book a week, one book a year, because traditional publishers don't usually want more than one book a year from most authors, and there's often a clause in your contract that says you can't sell another book to another publisher. Sometimes there's parameters on it, like you just can't sell a book in the same genre, or you could have a pen name. But anyway, it's not really encouraged oftentimes for you to write just like a crazy amount when you're in traditional publishing. Of course, that's somewhat genre dependent as well. There are definitely some mass market authors that write a lot, and especially if you're popular, you know, they start to be happier to get more books from you if your writing is selling very well. But in indie publishing, you know, a lot of what determines how much money you make is speed. And of course, not every successful indie author writes quickly, but if you can write a good book quickly, that is an advantage because you have a lot of voracious readers, or you can cover more genre ground. So when I got into indie publishing, the first book that I wrote that was like, well, it's my most successful book to this day. And I wrote the entire thing from idea to outline to first draft, second draft, line edits, published in 30 days. Actually a little less than 30 days. And I went on to write a number of books in about 30 days time. So it is entirely possible to do this. The book in question, Beauty and the Goblin King, was only 40,000 words. It's not a very long book. It is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. So the plot was somewhat already pre-existing. That isn't to say that fairy tale retellings don't all have their own twist, and sometimes it can be surprisingly tricky to figure out exactly how to spin your own twist on a fairy tale, but nevertheless, I do find it easier to write retellings and like very tropey books quickly. You are saving a lot of time on the plot structure by doing this. Like romance writers can often write very quickly because there are very expected beats as to what's going to happen in a romance novel. So you're not spending nearly as much time figuring out your initial outline. How are you going to bring all these elements together? And when you are writing, you're less likely to get stuck in some horrible tangle in the middle of the book because the plot is pretty straightforward. There's only so many ways that a lot of romance novels are going to go. And there's some other genres that are kind of like this as well. But my heart really lies with fantasy novels, and fantasy novels generally don't have quite so obvious of beats, and there's less reader expectation or desire for a fantasy novel to have such precise beats. That isn't to say there aren't common beats and tropes and plot progressions in fantasy and some of these other genres, but generally I would say it is more difficult for sure to write a fantasy novel that is good in 30 days. So when you hear someone say that they're writing, you know, an insane amount of books in a year, like I wrote 40 books in just a little over 4 years, and I'm not doing that now. I am currently taking about 6 to 9 months to write a novel because the books I'm writing now are very complicated and they have a lot more unique character progressions, and I have to spend a lot more time figuring out exactly what the characters want and where they're going and how to make their plot arc satisfying, and how to bring it all together, and how to show the world and develop the world, and how to work out external versus internal plots. It's a completely different beast. It takes so much more time, and if I had only ever written the things I most wanted to write, these fantasy novels, I would not have ever written such a colossal number of books. So when you're comparing yourselves to other authors on sheer number of books, like, all books are not created equal, not even close. There are some authors that can write more complicated books very quickly. Some people just have brains that are amazing as far as how well they can work for plotting. And also, if you're looking at like professional authors, they might be able to afford more in the way of like house cleaning, childcare, assistants to handle their marketing and things like that. So you don't want to compare yourself to those people in that regard either. Like, I could definitely get more writing done if I had people to handle other aspects of my life for me. But, I'm not going to compare myself to like the output of Brandon Sanderson, because I have a feeling Brandon Sanderson never has to like figure out his whole shopping list for the week and like spend time making a whole healthy meal with chopping vegetables and searing meats and stewing potatoes, all the things that I spend time on a daily basis. So this video is not like, you guys should be writing a book in 30 days, or you should be able to do this, or this is how you can write any book in 30 days. Like, no. Most people are not able to write most books in 30 days. And in fact, I don't think I could have written any book in 30 days if I hadn't have already had quite a lot of experience as a writer, working in traditional publishing, having editors, going through like rigorous editorial processes and studying the craft for years, because that gave me a good sense of like just how to work out plot problems, like what are going to be some of the common problems and how to get out of them. The more you study the craft of writing, and even perhaps more importantly, the more you actually write and finish projects, the better you will get at figuring out how to solve these problems to some degree. With that said, I am currently really struggling with my current manuscript. Like, that still happens to me all the time, where I'll get stuck for like a month or two and I just can't figure out what the heck is wrong with this damn thing. So it still happens. But now let's talk about how I did write a book in 30 days. I need some brain fuel. Magic Mind has really become a part of my daily routine ever since they first reached out to me to work with them last year. One thing that has hit me hard in my 40s is exhaustion, even when I get a good night's sleep, especially with perimenopause. Right now I'm getting my period every 23 days and the PMS is as bad as ever. Man, I need all the help I can get right now. This is why they're a favorite sponsor here. Magic Mind is a mental performance shot, and it's not just a quick boost from caffeine. With Magic Mind, you get mental clarity from nootropics and calm energy from the L-theanine and adaptogens. The energy boost is sustained and better for deep work than the coffee jitters, so it's great for a long day of writing when I need my mind sharp and clear. I absolutely recommend this if you've been struggling with brain fog, procrastination, or motivation like I've been. I know for me in my 40s, that was when brain fog, procrastination, lack of motivation really hit me hard, and I just need a little extra boost. I absolutely recommend this if you've been struggling with some of the same issues. And with my QR code or a link in the description, you can get 50% off a subscription so you can see if Magic Mind works for you, risk-free. You have 100 days to ask for a refund, even if you drink all the shots. Now let's talk about how to write a book quickly. So like I said, Beauty and the Goblin King, it is a short novel. It is almost getting into more of novella territory. Basically kind of the bare minimum you can get away with and call it a novel. Like if you submit to BookBub, which is one of the best places to market a discounted book, like later when you have a series especially, BookBub can be great. And I think their minimum for a novel is 40,000 words, or like an equivalent number of pages. So I would always try to aim for at least 40,000 words with anything that I was writing. And you want to start with like an easy plot template. There are books you write because you have this grand, unique vision. I definitely have those. But sometimes you just want to write something that's easy and fun. Even if you are this writer who's capable of spinning amazing plot lines, sometimes I still like to take a little break and write like a simpler book that's where I don't have to think so hard about every twist and turn. Just like as a reader, you might want to cleanse your palate after reading some really big involved book with just some like fun little rom-com or something. As a writer, I feel that too sometimes. No shame in writing a short, easy, either frothy or just like really gripping, exciting pacing kind of book that you can execute very quickly. So I started with the fairy tale Beauty and the Beast, and I just kind of like worked out a very easy outline based on the fairy tale. And when you're working on kind of a common plot line, and some of the common ones like in romance is like a Pride and Prejudice riff, a Beauty and the Beast riff, a Cinderella riff, you know, it could be fairy tales or popular novels that have stood the test of time like Jane Eyre, and you're just kind of coming up with like a thing that makes this unique to you. You're changing the setting or you're changing the scenario. So in the case of Beauty and the Goblin King, pretty obviously I wanted to kind of riff off of like Labyrinth, Hot Goblin King kind of vibe. So the concept was, instead of a beast, we have the Goblin King, who has been cursed. Also, it's a sexy book, so there's kind of a sexy element to the curse. And beyond that, I did not change a whole lot, except a few little things that unfolded like as I was writing. You don't need to reinvent the whole wheel with these types of books. And although I'm talking romance, this also applies to some other genres of books that have like your simple, basic plot lines. Romance certainly isn't the only one. But yes, the main point when you're outlining is like, don't get fancy. Don't start putting pressure on yourself to make every little bit of it unique, or to just give it something that's going to take a ton of research, something like that. Don't get involved in anything like that. And then you're writing an outline. Now, I know there are people who just are the seat of their pants type writers who don't do outlines and they still manage to write quickly, but I'm not one of them, and I have no idea how you would do it, so this is not the video for that kind of advice. For me, if I'm going to write something quickly, I need a simple beat by beat outline, like what each chapter is going to be, like one sentence. I'm going to walk myself through the entire plot and make sure that I have everything lined up before I start. And then you're going to start to write. You're going to follow that outline, and you're only going to deviate from it if something just kind of comes up organically that feels really right and just clicks in. You will know this feeling if you're having it. Sometimes things come up that just, they fit in so perfectly, it's almost like you didn't even have to think at all. They just, bam, pop right in, like a missing piece of a puzzle. If you get something like that, you should always roll with it. But if you start like overthinking a certain element, and like I was coming right off of traditional publishing. I mean, I'd written a few books, other indie books in between, but mostly I still was very much in a traditional publishing mindset. And like in traditional publishing, it was very common for my editor to question a lot of things as far as like, why does this need to be here? Did you resolve this character's arc satisfyingly? You know, is this fleshed out sufficiently? When you are writing just like a quick, fun little book, chances are your readers are going to be also reading it very quickly, and their motivation for reading it, like if it's a romance, all they really want is to like have those satisfying beats hit for them. And they're not going to be sitting there and analyzing like, did the sister character that appeared in chapter 3, did she ever like have a satisfying purpose within the greater thematic narrative? No, I know this is where some people will start to hate me for saying like dumbing down literature, that you can just kind of gloss over certain elements of a book. I really do feel like certain types of books have different aims for why people are reading them and what they care about while they're reading them. So there are pulpy fantasy novels that no one cares that much about, like the deeper thematic thing, unless they end up becoming like a classic. For like, sometimes themes arise even if you don't mean them to, but there are books that are more geared toward entertainment that people are not thinking that deeply about. And as a writer, you don't need to bring the same mindset to them as you do to like your great work. Disheveled Editing Lydia here. I have a different cat now. I also just wanted to point out that, you know, the focus of this channel is being like realistic about market conditions and what it actually takes to make a living as a writer. I feel like sometimes I need to remind people of that. Like, not that it probably matters, because, you know, if you want to comment and complain to me about the decline of literature, I can't stop you. But I've been in this for a long time. I've had a lot of friends who have been in it for a long time. So, like, I know what it takes to survive, what you sometimes have to do just to keep your writing flowing and, like, making money off it so you don't have to stop writing altogether. So, like, I'm realistic about these things. That's why sometimes I say, you know what, go write your fluff and don't work too hard on it. It's not because that's what I really like my ideal of literature. I'm just being realistic about, like, if you want to make a living, sometimes you have to cut some corners. That's been true for a long time. Some great writers who have made amazing works have also written some very fluffy, pulpy books. So anyway, you're going through your outline, beat by beat, chapter by chapter, and you're just not getting too hung up on things that aren't perfect. If something is not completely resolved to your satisfaction, or you feel like something didn't occur as perfectly as you wanted it to, you're just going to let it go and move on. Now, with the caveat that at the point that I was writing a book this quickly, I had a lot of experience writing already. And that's why I want to reiterate that you're generally not going to jump into your writing career doing this, like, right off the bat. It's much easier and you'll produce better quality works quickly if you already have a good bit of experience writing other stuff already. But some people just have the knack right off the bat. Some people never acquire the knack. So I can't really tell you exactly what point, like, okay, you're ready. For me, it was about like 10 books in. Okay, so you get the first draft done. Bam. You're fixing anything that really, you know, if you feel like it's a glaring problem and you can fix it easily, just try to keep things as easy as possible. And then you're going to move on to just line edits. And again, you're not going to get super hung up in your line edits either. I have a whole video about line editing if you really want to, like, dig into my line editing process. But my line editing process for, like, their written to market, quick, Amazon treadmill kind of books is very different than my line editing process for the books in my fantasy world that are, like, my babies. I probably take 3 or 4 times as long line editing with my babies. So when you're doing the line editing with, like, a quick read, you're mainly just trying to, like, make sure it reads well, it makes sense. Like, you're not getting really over analytical. When I'm going into deep line edits, I'm probably reading the whole thing like 3 or 4 times, really analyzing, like, do I have repeated words? Can I make this description more vivid? Can I just tweak this dialogue? I'm really digging in and trying to find ways to, like, really let the book shine. Whereas when you're writing quickly, you're mainly just trying to make sure there's nothing terrible, anything that's going to pull the reader out of the experience, make them pause and go, like, ugh, that's terrible writing, or what the heck is going on here? That doesn't make any sense. You just want to make sure, like, it reads nicely. It's an easy, fun read without anything that's going to get people stuck on a paragraph or anything like that. And once that's done, you just need to make sure you got an amazing cover and you can publish it. So the time frame for these things for me is probably like 1 or 2 days to, like, conceive and outline the plot, although generally I'm conceiving a lot of the plot on the back burner in my brain while I'm working on whatever the previous book was. Then I'm probably taking like 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks to actually write the whole book, and then probably like 5 days to line edit, and then put up a pre-order or just publish it straight, depending on your strategy. And that's how you do it. Now, again, I'm not saying that anybody necessarily should be doing this. One of the problems, I think, with indie publishing, one of the reasons it can often feel like the quality of writing is diminishing is because of this self-publishing treadmill and people feeling pressured to write books increasingly faster so that they can have a big back catalog. And I got very much stuck in this situation where I started out in traditional publishing. I was writing a book a year. I was taking all this time on it, going through rigorous edits, both on my own before I gave it to my agent, then sometimes another edit if my agent had a few notes, and then maybe 1 or 2 big rounds with an editor. It was a lot of work just to produce one book, and then, the books didn't do that well, which is common, and then your publisher's not that excited about you anymore, and that was when I moved to indie publishing. And when I started with indie publishing, I was still writing somewhat slower. I started with the Cursed Soul trilogy, and those books took like 3 months each to write, but I could see that if I wanted to make a living, like a good living at it, which I very much needed to do at the time, I would have to write faster, if at all possible. And that's how I got into writing so quickly. It is very grueling, and it is not my best work, although it did help me become such a better writer in such a short time that I think, although the books themselves maybe are not always my best work, there are some really good writing that came out of it. Just kind of the way sometimes writing doesn't need time. Sometimes it only needs inspiration. And inevitably, if you're pushing yourself, sometimes the inspiration is actually going to blossom anyway. And I think I leveled up tremendously during this time. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's all bad for writers to write quickly. Far from it. But I also really don't want to do that my whole career, because you're not going to write like a really well thought out epic fantasy, for example, in 30 days or even 3 months. And you can kind of compare writing to cooking sometimes. Sometimes you just want a burger. Sometimes you want an entire, holiday spread with like 8 dishes, some of which took 3 days to prepare. And sometimes both of those taste equally good, but you wouldn't necessarily want to be stuck only eating and cooking one or the other. And you will also level up as a cook if you take the time to perfect your burger as well as your holiday meal. There is a time and a season for different types of writing and reading. So yeah, mainly I just wanted to explain to everyone who has commented like, wow, you write so fast, I have so much catching up to do, that it's complicated. It took me a long time before I felt confident writing that quickly, and it's also not something I could sustain for very long. I really sincerely hope I never have to try to write 10 books a year ever again, and if I did try, I'm not even sure if I could at this point. I think that my burnout after several years of doing this was just so severe that I'm not sure that I could really ever do that again. But I'm glad I did for the time that I did. I definitely improved as a writer as a result of it, but it is a very specific set of circumstances that leads to that kind of writing. So I hope this was helpful. I know that there's a lot of people have tried to write a book in a month, thanks to the NaNoWriMo challenge, or as we're now calling it, various other non-NaNoWriMo things. Have you ever written a book in 30 days? And what was that experience like for you? Do you have any thoughts on writing fast versus writing slow? Different types of writing in different time frames? Give me all your comments. You know how this works. Thank you so much to Magic Mind for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check them out with my QR code or link in the description. If you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove, and I have been a professional writer since 2009, both traditional and indie published. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to click that like and subscribe. If you want more from me, I have a Patreon and a Substack. Same content on both, free tier for both, and I also have YouTube paid memberships turned on. The paid tier of any of those gets you 2 bonus videos every month voted on by you guys, as well as access to my Discord server where we chat about writing and nerdy stuff all day long. If you'd like to read any of my books, there's a link in the description, and my free book of the month is Fae Sworn. It is steamy and funny, and one I really had a lot of fun writing. Thank you, as always, so much for being here. Thank you for supporting the channel. And for those of you who enjoy being here for the lives, I try to post every Sunday at 3 o'clock Eastern and most Wednesdays at 8 or 9 p.m. Eastern. And I will see you next time. Bye!